Alright, number 10. More than one. Starting off with a pretty basic point, but there have been more than one person to take up the mantle of Scarlet Spider. The first, who most people would be referencing, and my favorite, is Ben Reilly, who first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 149. But the Scarlet Spider name has been used by a few others, including Joseph Wade, more on him later, Kane from Web of Spider-Man number 119, or any one of the Scarlet Spiders who, during the initiative, were cloned from the genetically perfect body of MVP. Three of which were replicas of Spider-Man's Iron Spider costume as a team of Scarlet Spiders, though most had been killed off by the end of the initiative. Speaking of clones, coming in at number 9, clones. Almost every character who held the Scarlet Spider name was a clone. Ben Reilly was the first to show face, created by Miles Warren, the Jackal, as a perfect genetic clone of Peter Parker. He disappeared after his fight with Peter and returned later as Ben Reilly. The other well-known one, Kane, was also a clone created by the Jackal, only he was imperfect. So not only does he live in the shadow of Peter, he's got the insult of cellular degradation. After he healed, he also became Scarlet Spider. I already mentioned the Scarlet Spiders, and then there is Joseph Wade, who wasn't a clone at all, but again, more on him later. Number 8. Upgrades. Not just upgrades, actually. Ben Reilly, after returning to New York and becoming a hero, made sure to make himself separate from Peter Parker's Spider-Man by using a costume that was different enough. It actually looks very comfortable sporting that sleeveless hoodie. Apart from the red suit and blue hoodie, Ben made upgrades and differences to his web shooters, adding impact webbing and stingers, which are paralyzing darts he could use in battle. Kane, on the other hand, didn't really make upgrades at all. Instead, he just used a modified stolen Spider-Man stealth suit. This is partly why Ben is better. Hold up! I just want to say thanks for watching. Hit me with a comment below about which version of Scarlet Spider or even Spider-Man is your favorite, and don't forget to drop a like. Alright, let's move on to number 7. Number 7! The Other. With the Moon Knight comics giving us the idea of humans becoming the avatar for deities in the MCU, I thought it would be fun to talk about the Other. In the comics, a lot of the spider-like characters, of which there are many, supposedly have to thank a giant spider totem deity called the Other for their abilities. After Peter Parker lost his will to live to Morlun, he was offered resurrection by the Other, and he took it, becoming the Other's avatar, although bargaining to reject some of the less than savory aspects of that transformation. After Kane Parker's release from his mortal coil, he was chosen as the new avatar for the Other, becoming like a spider, like a man-spider, Spider-Man, man-spider. That is really confusing. You get it. Number 6. The Jackal. Both versions of Scarlet Spider have gone to the afterlife and come back from it. Ben Reilly's run-in with the End was a bit worse in my opinion though. You see, after his initial departure from life thanks to clone degeneration, he was brought back to life by his own creator, the Jackal. But not just once. No, the Jackal brought Ben Reilly back 27 times, meaning he met the afterlife 27 times. Almost understandably, this drove him to the point of insanity. He escaped and replaced Miles Warren as the Jackal and dastardly vowed to clone the whole world. He was eventually defeated and went back to being the Scarlet Spider, but he was forever struggling with the whole insanity thing, and would be a bit more of an anti-hero, doing things both heroic and criminal in nature. Number 5. His name. Not the Scarlet Spider name, that just sounds really cool. I mean his actual name. Ben Reilly. Ben chose this name for himself, and comic book fans can connect the dots to figure out where it came from. But for those of you who need an explanation, allow me. Being a clone of Peter Parker, and even believing he was Peter Parker for a while, he has a deep connection to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. So Ben is obvious, in memory of Uncle Ben. But Reilly would be the maiden name of his Aunt May, coming together to give us Ben Reilly. Love it. As for our other clone, Kane Parker, again, the Parker part of things is more than obvious, but he initially went by just Kane for a while, inspired by the burn marks his imperfected spider clone abilities would leave on his enemies. But once Peter took him in as a brother, he was given the Parker last name, so yay. Number 4. New Warriors. The New Warriors are a team that first appeared in 1989, and they were a team of super-powered teens, whose most famous member, at least in my opinion, would be Nova. The team was around for all of the 90s, pretty much all the way up until, as part of a reality show, they accidentally started the superhuman civil war. That isn't really the best thing to have as your claim to fame, but hey, everyone makes mistakes. While Spider-Man teamed up with them from time to time, Ben Reilly was the first spider hero to join the team when Spider-Side steals a contagion isotope from Gene Tech, and the Warriors are hired to look into it. But he would eventually leave the team when he took up another heroic pursuit suit. Unsurprisingly, Ben Reilly, much like Peter, isn't really a fan of letting people know his secret identity, which causes some tension in the team. What kind of seals that tension is when a certain someone named Joseph Wade shows up. Number 3. Evil Scarlet Spider. Okay, now we can talk about that other Scarlet Spider, Joseph Wade. So we know he isn't just another Peter Parker clone. So who the heck is this guy? FBI agent Joe Wade was assigned to investigate Dr. Octopus, who at this time was not Otto Octavius, who was de-lifed by Kane. Dr. Octopus was Carolyn Traynor, the daughter of one of Ben's close friends. That's the Scarlet Spider connection. While investigating Carolyn, Joe was kidnapped by her and he was turned into a silver-skinned, hard-light duplicate version of Scarlet Spider, going around committing villainous deeds to make the real Scarlet Spider look bad. Eventually, Joe became a real mechanized Scarlet Spider with superhuman strength and speed. He had claws on his fingertips and he could also fire webbing from his wrists, crawl up walls, and interestingly, fire laser stingers from his eyes. It took Ben Reilly teaming up with the New Warriors to finally be able to stop him, and then they kind of fell out of love with him. Number 2. Death. In Marvel Comics, there is a cosmic entity known as Death. She represents decay and destruction in the universe. There's a group of characters who have become heavily connected with this character for different reasons. Thanos is one of the big ones, being driven to de-life many people to try and appease her and win her affection. Kind of one of the reasons he tried to assemble the Infinity Gauntlet in the first place. Another would be Deadpool, who is also incredibly in love with Death. But another character with less of a lovey-dovey relationship with Death is Ben Reilly, who intrigued Death when he was resurrected all those many times. She would often mess with him, but has also helped him on a few occasions, like when she healed the clone deformation and when she resurrected Kane and another boy. I always find it interesting when this grim cosmic entity shows up in comics. Number 1. He became Spider-Man. Remember how Ben left the New Warriors to pursue other heroic endeavors? This was it. After being convinced that Ben was actually the original Peter Parker, Peter had a bit of an identity crisis and departed from the Spider-Man name, giving up the mantle to Ben Reilly, who took it on with a new look that was similar to the original but with some minor changes to do with color choices and logo placement. This is also where we saw Ben face off against Venom and develop those technologies we talked about before. This is where Ben's fate lay, and it was what Marvel was working their way towards for quite a while. He remained Spider-Man for quite a few years until he was brought to an end thanks to Norman Osborn. He died saving Peter from one of Goblin's attacks, which actually proved to Peter that he was indeed the true Peter Parker when Ben's body dematerialized like the other clones did. This brought the clone saga to an end, but Ben would return as no one as popular as him could be gone for too long.
Number 10. Beyond Corporation. What happened to make Ben Reilly become the villainous being known as Chasm? That's a good question. Really, this is all explained in the pages of the Spider-Man Beyond event or storyline, which had a ton of tie-ins as well as extra bonus stories with their Point Bay issues, which occurred in between issues of the main storyline, diving deeper into the intricacies of smaller story points as the story unfolded. The Beyond event was a weekly release, so there was lots to read for those of us who followed along with this event. But overall, I'd say this event was worth all the reading with lots of fun moments as well as many twists and turns to keep us guessing, as well as keep us eager to turn every single page. One of the highlights for me was definitely the team up between Mary Jane and Black Cat. In the Beyond event, Ben Reilly takes over the mantle of Spider-Man after the Beyond Corporation gains the rights to the Spider-Man name and hires him to be basically their Spider-Man. Peter for a while is in a coma, leaving Ben mostly uncontested for the Spider-Man moniker, except for Miles of course, who is actually served papers and threatened to change his name or deal with being sued. Eventually, it's revealed that Beyond was manipulating Ben's mind, and even that Ben had signed off on this, wanting to forget some less desirable moments in his past. However, after he catches on to their real purpose, a violent mind wipe goes wrong, leaving integral memories of Ben damaged and causing him to forget who he is and kind of have like a bit of an identity crisis. In the end, he chooses to die rather than accept help from Peter and falls into a pit of green ooze as the Beyond Corporation headquarters in New York is destroyed. Or at least, we thought he was dead. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here on Top 10 Nerd and you love hearing about how some more heroic characters can become evil, we have a Top 10 Evil Alternate Versions playlist for you to check out where you can learn about all the evil alternates that exist in the multiverse. Number 9. The Ooze. In reality, Ben fell into the pit of ooze and was reborn again, this time with improved oozified powers. These newfound powers give him an enhanced spider sense, which also lashes out at the danger that he senses. defenses. He can also hit people with blasts of ooze now too. Ooze-tastic. Number 8. Dark Web. What is Dark Web? Well, it's the current ongoing Spider-Man event, following what happened in Beyond, which we already touched on and which resulted in the creation of Chasm. Ben Reilly now has a new identity and a new purpose. He has been warped by his loss of memories completely, and probably from falling into a bunch of ooze. He decides the best course of action now is to take out those responsible for his fall from grace, and he decides to ally himself with others who have been wronged in order for them to all achieve their own similar but different objectives. Chasm's plan is to defeat Peter Parker, who he sees as a threat, and who he ultimately blames for all the things that have befallen him, basically feeling that Peter is kind of keeping memories from him, when really that's not what Peter wants to be doing. Dark Web is about these various villains coming together to redeem what they feel they are owed, having all been twisted in some way by past traumas, and for some of them kind of current traumas. Really, it's an event about confronting the pain others have caused you and all the various ways you can deal with, and you can hopefully potentially heal from that. Number 7. Chasm. Why the name Chasm? Does it mean anything to Ben? Why, yes, of course it does. Chasm is a name that Ben chose in reference to the memories that he is missing, because without them there is a great void in his mind. You might say, a great chasm? What memories did Ben lose? Well, chiefly he lost the memories that made him who he was, a hero. He lost the formative memories that he shares with Peter of their childhood, a childhood that Peter actually lived but Ben only remembers. He also lost some of the memories that Beyond wanted him to lose, ideally, which means that he wouldn't have remembered uncovering their secrets. So in that way, it kind of makes sense that when it comes to who he blames for the missing memories and the lack of a sense of self, he would blame Peter for this more than not. Although I do believe at the end of Beyond he does kind of figure out that Beyond was still kind of behind everything, but I do question how much of the memories he has of that are there. There is also the fact that Maxine Danger, head of the division of Beyond that Ben did work for, implied that the only way to get back his memories would basically be to use one of their devices to forcefully take said memories from Peter, pitting the two against one another during the final showdown in that event. Number 6. The Calling. We also learn near the beginning of Dark Web of how Chasm may not have even been the major player behind the plot here. As Chasm, Ben is suffering. He is questioning who he is, and every thought and memory he has left seems to only cause him more suffering, more pain. He has been raiding Beyond safe houses, as we learn in issue number 14 of the Amazing Spider-Man series, and finding all kinds of tech there. And it seems to be one of the only things that brings him any sense of relief. Well, maybe other than Janine's presence, who, she obviously, I think, makes him feel a little better. The tech he claims feels like some kind of key. He knows that Beyond was using it in some kind of project that was near completion called Project Purgatory, and he believes with his genius he can actually get it to work. And it seems that is the key to the calling he is feeling, reaching out to him from a place. A place called Number 5. Limbo. Chasm isn't just allied with anyone when it comes to this Dark Web event. He's allied with one of the most powerful villains around, one of the most powerful people around, Madeline Pryor. Madeline Pryor more recently seemed to be focused on healing, moving past her traumas, not villainy, but it turns out this was all part of a larger plot to get what she wanted most. Madeline Pryor apparently hadn't actually healed, at least not fully, and what she needed to complete the process, or what she needed because the process hadn't been completed maybe, was the memories that were stolen from her. These were the memories of Nate, aka once baby Christopher, growing up. Jean ended up acquiring all of Madeline's memories following the original Inferno event in the comics when Maddie was defeated. Jean ended up in a way becoming like a mom to Nate because of this, because she had an emotional connection to him, with all the memories of raising the baby that Maddie had prior. And now Madeline wants all of that back. Well, she wants the backlog of stuff that she missed. She wanted not just the memories of raising baby Christopher, but also the memories of what happened with raising him after she'd missed out on that. And she also wanted all the memories involving her and her death and her funeral. And this was where her allegiance with Chasm basically came in. Chasm is also after his lost memories, which he feels Peter Parker has stolen from him, and aims to get them back himself, and also end Peter Parker in a sort of there can only be one type showdown. Number 4. Hallows Eve. Not only is Madeline an ally of Chasm, but so is Hallows Eve. Hallows Eve is actually Janine Godby, who is Ben's love interest, kind of like his version of Mary Jane, but if Mary Jane had an even more messed up childhood and was also forced into becoming a murderer and a criminal in self-defense, spending most of her adult life in prison. Hallows Eve ends up becoming a villainous sidekick to Chasm and the Goblin Queen in the Dark Web event after Maddie uses the demonic magic of Limbo to give Hallows Eve powers. Hallows Eve can essentially create masks which have different effects on her enemies depending on which one she's wearing and wielding wielding at the time. The symbolism here is kind of in reference to the fact that in her life, Janine has felt she had to assume many different identities in order to survive, which is why Maddie sort of gave her that power. Even her name, Janine, is actually not her original name, but one she adopted when she was on the run, although it is the name she chooses to be addressed and referred to by in preference to her given name, because obviously she has past stuff attached to that she does not want to think about, I imagine. Number 3. Venom. While not as Chasm specific, I feel like this point is still really relevant when it comes to Chasm and his story in Dark Web. Chasm and the Goblin Queen, along with their sidekick Hallows Eve, aren't the only ones who end up allied together in this event. Venom also gets sucked into this villainous team up himself, which might seem odd initially, considering that Venom is Eddie Brock, who isn't even really Venom anymore, but rather is the King in Black following the defeat of Null. Not only that, but Eddie for the last few years has really been more of a straight up hero, not a villain at all. Venom, the symbiote Venom, would go on to bond with Dylan Brock, Eddie's son, but after Eddie ends up in limbo requesting help from Madeline and Chasm, Maddie sees an opportunity here. She agrees to help Eddie find his son, but in exchange forces him to join her and Chasm's plot, removing Eddie's memories of Dylan. Now this makes him believe he is Venom once more, but after he realizes his other is no longer there and he's alone, he instead becomes the future villainous version of himself, or one of those, Bedlam. Number 2. Gus. Maybe one of the darkest moments of all comes to us in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 14, at least thus far. In this late 2022 issue, Chasm is revealed to be allied with both the Goblin Queen and Hallows Eve, and ends up confronting someone who repeatedly has mistaken him for Peter, insisting that Ben pay him what Peter owes. Well, before Ben had simply responded that, he was not in fact Peter, so just stop talking to me, I'm not Peter. This time around, Ben instead beats the man up and then takes him to limbo. There, Madeline Pryor kills the man by consuming his soul, and in so doing, receives his memories. This tactic then inspires Chasm when it comes to how to best retrieve his memories from Peter. No longer having the device, I believe, that Maxine offered him before, Ben now plans to kill Peter and consume his soul in order to regain the memories lost to him. Not only is that a super dark and terrifying thought and twist, but we also need to acknowledge here that Ben and Janine both became accessories to murder. Number 1. Pain. As if someone wasn't bad enough, it seems the key to understanding Chasm and so many of the characters' narratives present in Dark Web as well is understanding loss and pain. To really understand why Ben becomes Chasm and why he pursues Peter so ruthlessly, you need to understand what his loss feels like. In issue number 14 of Amazing Spider-Man from 2022, Ben describes his loss to Janine and how it feels to him. I've lost a lifetime. I don't know what I was before I woke up in the Jackal's lab. There's nothing and then I'm just there. And everything after that is scrambled. The only memories that seem to punch through, the ones carrying pain. People telling me I'm not real, beyond manipulating me, all the dying, all the loss. I don't remember meeting you, but I remember all the times I lost you. Pain, pain, pain. It's understandable why he and so many others involved in this story seem to be turning to the darker side, because, I mean, they sound to really be hurting. And isn't that how it usually goes? You get hurt, and you usually end up hurting others. Even if on paper that seems like an obvious thing to not do as someone who's been hurt, it never seems to be quite so obvious to characters, or honestly even real world people in the moment. Number 10. The hospital issue. Do you love horror comics? Well then Beyond even has you covered for that. I know, I wasn't expecting to read this story and become terrified, and yet here we are. The hospital issue of the Beyond story is issue 82 of Amazing Spider-Man. Now, hospitals for me are already creepy, but Saladin Ahmed and Jorge Fornes really make them seem a lot more creepy and horrifying in this issue. After Peter has awakened from his coma, he's still in no shape to return to a life of crime fighting. He is forced to rest in the hospital, but is called into action when he notices patients beginning to mysteriously disappear. It seems as though while Peter is in no state to go toward the danger has found a way to come to him. Yay! He and MJ must face off against a monster that threatens not just the lives of the patients around Peter Parker, but his own life as well. Number 9. Acknowledging and accepting trauma. It seems that part of the reason why Peter and Ben are struggling so much, or what their problems both stem from overall, are their lack of ability or willingness to embrace and accept the grief and recent trauma that has happened in their lives. With Peter, he just went through a whole ordeal with Kindred, who was revealed to be both of the fake children of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn, Gabriel and Sarah. Really, these two weren't Gwen or Norman's children, but were created recruited by Harry to mess with both Norman and Peter, who he made to believe that the children were Gwen's and Norman's when they weren't. Thank goodness for that retcon. Thank you. Thank goodness. Harry, being a clone, however, wasn't aware of his original self's plot, and to make amends for what he knew original Harry would have regretted on his deathbed once he found out about this plot, decided to sacrifice himself to help Peter in the fight against the kindred siblings, allowing Spider-Man to defeat them in the end, but at the cost of his recently returned best friend, Harry Osborn. Classic stuff. Ben, on the other hand, was recently on a path of redemption after becoming the villain known as the Jackal, but seems to have decided to avoid dealing with that trauma by agreeing to allow Beyond to mess with his mind so that he would forget about it ever happening. All in all, I imagine before Ben or Peter can fully recover, they're going to need to address, embrace, and finally process this trauma and grief they're both kind of running from right now. And this is kind of alluded to as well in issue 75, the first issue of the Beyond story. I love doing these lists because I get to go back through these issues and be like, oh man, let's like comb through and see the things that have now grown that had little stems at the beginning, and I can like see where they started from. It's so cool. Also friends, if you want more lists on Beyond so you know what issues you need to buy and so you can follow along as it continues to evolve, because hey, this story is not over yet, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Comatose. Beyond is mainly a story that focuses on Ben Reilly, who is taking up the mantle of Spider-Man currently. While Peter is also there and he and MJ as well as Aunt May still take focus and get time dedicated to them in the story, the reason why you won't be seeing as much of them as Ben and his team over at Beyond is because shortly after the story starts, Peter actually ends up in a coma. Now don't worry, he isn't in a coma for like this whole story, and he actually goes on a journey of his own because of this setback, which I'm finding to be quite interesting. But he does end up out of action for a little bit. I actually am very happy with the way they did this because I was worried that he was going to be in a coma for the whole thing and I was going to be like, is he going to have some sort of like mind journey? But no, he's also having a literal physical journey. And fortunately, Peter being in a coma is how we end up getting the smoking hot team of Aunt May and Doc Ock that I was talking about on part 1 of this list. Peter's state brings comics' hottest couple back together as Aunt May searches for a way to cure Peter and wake him up. Although May ends up abandoning Otto due to his lack of morals, in the end Otto does right by May and Peter, dropping off what the doctors need to find a cure. So like I said, his time in the coma this time around is short, but it also helps to give Peter something to overcome, as even when he awakes, he is still somewhat out of sorts and needs to focus on his own recovery. Number 7. Animal. The animal crop top has returned. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I've already been very excited about this. Seriously, I need to get myself one of these crop tops. I love it so much. In one of the latest issues, issue 87 of the ASM series, Peter Parker, while being retrained by Black Cat and Captain America, is told that he is unworthy of his Spider-Man suit. He has to earn it. And so instead he wears a slew of other outfits while sporting his bombastic Bagman mask. One such look features this classic animal crop top, which Peter once said was given to him as a gift from a grad student buddy of his as a gag. This is mentioned when he wears it to Liz and Harry's pool party / housewarming in issue 249 of The Amazing Spider-Man. Sure, the color of the lettering is different compared to that original appearance, but it definitely still seems to be the same style top. Maybe his old one got damaged and he just loved it so much he like bought a replacement, but the lettering is obviously a different color. I seriously love this shirt more than I have words for, and to see it reappear here, what history on the page, what style. I can't believe Pete has had it all these years and that it was among the clothes likely Aunt May or MJ packed to bring to him during his stay at the hospital, where he is still feigning and actually recovering when not busy relearning how to swing around on rooftops and of course fight. Number 6. Marcus Montplaisir. Who is Marcus Montplaisir? He is basically Ben Reilly's eyes and ears when it comes to briefings on missions, what is going on the ground, and also seems to be a contact point for many other folks at Beyond who are involved with the corporate Spider-Man or his romantic partner Janine. Janine in fact has a direct line to Marcus and can call him whenever she is worried about Ben, and I mean vice versa. Marcus seems to be mainly loyal to Beyond, although he doesn't seem as morally corrupt as some of the other people who work for that corporation. At least not yet. Also, because he is so close to Beyond, this could mean that he ends up as an experiment instead of an employee, and possibly becomes a villain against his will. On the cover of the future issue number 92, as seen in solicits, it seems as though a future villain who appears to be a hybrid of the Lizard with possibly Morbius's wings could actually be another reptile villain who was once a friendly face for Spider-Man, aka Ben Reilly, based on what he's wearing. And of course that friendly face, I mean, it could be Marcus, I don't know. I feel like everyone's gonna become a villain and it's gonna blow my mind. Number 5. Dr. Kafka. Dr. Kafka returns in the Beyond story as Ben's therapist, hired by Beyond themselves to act in such a capacity. She only agrees to join the team because Ben is involved, and she finds him to be quite an interesting prospect when it comes to having a client for therapy. A new series that takes us back to Ben's earlier days as Spider-Man, Ben Reilly Spider-Man, has recently come out in the midst of this story as well, and I would actually recommend that you dive into it, as it also features Dr. Kafka, the original Doctor before she was a clone, because the current Dr. Kafka is actually a clone. Back then, she also attempts to befriend and help Ben Reilly, who is too moody at the time and too hurt to accept her help as a friend or as a therapist, at least initially. Ben Reilly Spider-Man, in my opinion, is also recommended reading if you are jumping into this Beyond story. It focuses heavily on Ben, who is really the main character of the Beyond story as well, and also features Dr. Kafka, who is now becoming a major adversary in the Beyond story. Spoilers, Queen Goblin. Everyone's becoming a villain. That's what I want to happen. All the people that we were there trying to help Ben, and he's gonna have to fight them. It's gonna be a mess. Oh my gosh. Number 4. Janine and MJ team up. Janine and MJ come together at the end of issue 87 of ASM. These two ladies are kind of like parallel versions of one another when it comes to the role that they play as ally, partner, and love interest in their own spiders' lives. Janine Godby is Ben Reilly's redheaded love interest, and Mary Jane is Peter Parker's redheaded love interest. Of course, each woman is so much more than that, and both couldn't have had more different lives, though one thing is for certain, they both have had to overcome a lot of adversity, and neither has really had an easy life, that's a given. So I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that when Janine decides to take action and escape her swanky yet prison-like apartment with Beyond by taking Marcus hostage and making him release her, MJ is one of the first people she reaches out to for help. Janine of course brings with her the valuable Beyond drive, which Ben recovered a few issues back from Doc Ock, but chooses to keep from Beyond when he learns just some of the dark secrets that are hidden on it, discovering why Beyond really chose him. It seems now that Ben has been taken by Beyond and kept from Janine that she rightfully expects the worst, and only trusts MJ and likely Peter to help both her and Ben at this point. Number 3. Making villains. It doesn't just seem like Beyond is focused on developing superheroes or in conducting cool and sometimes disturbing experiments either. It seems as though they are specifically baiting and perhaps even creating their own villains for some reason. It's possible they want to lure in villains to get samples so that they can create their own superpowered beings, be they villains or heroes. It's also interesting how whenever Ben Reilly has gone in to face a threat as Beyond Spider-Man, such as his first encounter with him going up against the UFOs, he is always perfectly outfitted to handle whatever powers he'll be facing, as though they know who to expect. Possibly because the villains themselves are being hired by Beyond to attack so that Spider-Man can defend against them. After all, the fight with the UFOs in issue 75 was also what ended up leaving Peter Parker's Spider-Man in a coma, while Ben's suit had already been specifically created to survive the specific types of attacks being thrown his way. Coincidence? I don't think so. Number 2. The Obsidian Star. The Obsidian Star power source seems to be something that Maxine Danger, the head of the superhero development department of Beyond, really wanted. It makes me think that Danger is looking to get grants and turn Beyond into a company that fronts like S.H.I.E.L.D. but really just uses their superheroes to mine the field for valuable resources, which they can then use to develop other inventions for the mass market. They're basically finding a way to turn superheroes into money-making devices. Either way, the Obsidian Star would then likely be a valuable asset to them if it is a massive power source, as I imagine. We see it appear in issue 78 Point Bay of ASM, or Point B if you prefer. As I said in part 1, the tie-ins are important for this story, and I really do recommend that you read them all. They're also quite good, they're really fun. They're good tie-ins, you should read them. This one features a team-up flashback tale from Misty Knight and Colleen Wing, the Daughters of the Dragon, who are working for Beyond to help train Ben and battle some some beasties for them as well. They were sent to receive the Obsidian Star, but after recounting their adventure, claimed that they didn't find it or retrieve it, though the flashback reveals otherwise to us readers. Instead of giving it to Maxine, they entrust the Obsidian Star to Spectrum, aka Monica Rambeau, who will likely return with it in issue 92 Point Bay as suggested by its cover, which was revealed in the solicits. Number 1. Maxine Danger. While Marcus, who works for Beyond, seems like an overall okay guy, who often means well and is trying to do what's right for both his own team and the corporation, Maxine is the opposite in terms of that balance. She is basically all corporate. In fact, if this were like Cyberpunk 2077, I would definitely classify her as a corpo. Actually, I might make a corpo character just based on Maxine. That's how much I like her. She doesn't care a tiny bit what anyone thinks of her. She is demanding when it comes to her expectations and very unforgiving when it comes to those who disappoint her. She is intimidating and powerful, acting solely on the behalf of the Beyond Corporation and their best interests, and her own best interests, and doing anything to protect the company that she represents, even possibly harm or permanently alter her employees. And I have no doubt that not even the law or morals would get in the way when it comes to her getting her way. Number 10. Kind of the worst. Even in the comics, Miguel doesn't necessarily have a history of being the kindest soul around. In fact, before he became Spider-Man, he was actually one of the worst people. Even Miguel himself knows this and has stated before as much, acknowledging that he used to be a huge jerk and now tries to take action to make up for his misdeeds in the past. Initially, Miguel was someone who really only cared about himself and his own interests, until he realized that this was not only not getting him to where he wanted to be, but also causing undue hurt to the people and the world around him. Miguel also at one point stole his brother Gabriel's girlfriend. Dana basically became Miguel's fiance after she cheated on Gabriel with Miguel, and she and Miguel fell in love, which is, I feel like speaks to Miguel's character at the beginning of his story. And friends, before we move on to our next point here, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. Number 9. Villain Origin. Miguel O'Hara was a genius working for Alchemax in genetics. He was pressured into experimenting on people in an attempt to, in essence, recreate superpowered individuals. When the experiment went awry, however, he tried to get out and was blackmailed into staying with the company. But Miguel didn't like how he was being controlled and would go to any lengths to free himself, including experimenting on himself. Miguel in this way has a bit of a supervillain tinge to his origin story, if you ask me. Most villains start off kind of in this manner, experimenting on themselves because they're desperate, sometimes to help themselves and sometimes to help others. In Miguel's case, it was to help himself. But while the experiment was sabotaged by his supervisor, it did still work, ultimately curing him of his compulsions, which were sort of keeping him tethered to the company, while also splicing his DNA with the spider and granting him superhuman abilities and powers. Number 8. Has a son. I didn't even know this about Miguel, and I actually learned about it while doing research for this list, so hey, I learned something too here. Miguel actually has a son in the comics, so it's not just in the animated universe that he has played the role of father. In the comics, his son is Gabriel O'Hara, nicknamed Gabri. Gabri is the son of both Miguel's Spider-Man 2099 and another sometimes superpowered individual, Tempest. Tempest Monroe was turned into an insectoid monster a few times in the comics, both times when she was being cured, actually. This first happened when Miguel secretly administered a cure for cancer from the year 2099 to her. The second time this happened was when Miguel's father, Tyler Stone, attempted to cure damage to Tempest's spine, which had left her paralyzed. Number 7. Died. Miguel O'Hara has come face to face with death a few times, but he pretty much always survived. At one point he was killed in the comics, but thankfully was able to be resurrected afterwards. This happened as a result of a fight with Tempest, his baby mama. However, this isn't because she actually wanted to hurt him, but because she was being mind controlled into doing so by Miguel's biological father, the evil Tyler Stone. I know! What a dramatic turn of events. Fortunately, in the same issue that he died, 2015's Spider-Man 2099, issue number 25, he is also brought back to life by 2099's Doctor Strange. In fact, the whole reason he's able to even go and save Tempest in the first place, when he ultimately dies from her being brainwashed and lashing out as he rescues her, is because a future version of his son, Gabri, let him know where to go. It If that isn't a 2099 storyline, I don't know what it is. Your kid from the future telling you. While Miguel never becomes the CEO of Alchemex, despite his troubled past involving them, he does actually end up following in his father's footsteps, kind of. His father was not the CEO either, but instead was the head of their research and development department, as well as the vice president of the company. When Tyler actually went to work for 2099's Doom, or one of them anyways, who became the president of the United States, he named Miguel as his successor. Miguel took control over the department, and later when Tyler returned attempting to get his job back, Miguel actually refused to give it over, which honestly fair enough. Number 5. His brother is Venom. Well, his half-brother, anyways, on his dad's side. Kron Stone is actually Miguel's brother through his father, Tyler Stone. The two brothers never really got along, and Kron actually was completely unaware that Miguel was his brother. Kron in this timeline is the one behind having Punisher 2099, Jake Gallo's family killed. As payback, the Punisher pays him a visit and leaves him to die in the sewers, which is where he is left to bleed out. However, just as it seems that Kron is done for, and honestly, I gotta say, kinda good riddance, he bonds with a black ball of goo that turns out to be the Venom symbiote, who after all these years has continued to mutate and change, surviving. Kron becomes the original 2099 Venom and fights against Miguel, becoming his rival and yearning to cause him pain. In fact, Kron even succeeds in hurting Miguel when he kills Dana, Miguel's ex, who was once his fiance. Number 4. Powers and abilities. While not as strong, as fast, or as intelligent as Peter Parker's Spider-Man, Miguel O'Hara still has some very impressive powers. His powers come from his DNA being rewritten to basically 50% spider. In fact, exactly 50% spider, I should say. This also changed his appearance, giving him fangs and making his eyes turn red. Hence why in Across the Spider-Verse they call him, sort of that like vampire Spider-Man. Although there are also some other famous vampires in the Spider-Verse that I'm thinking we may still see as well, but we'll have to wait and find out. Spider-Man 2099 possesses superhuman levels of strength, endurance, agility, reflexes, speed, and durability. He also has a pretty potent healing factor, allowing him to heal from cuts within minutes. His healing factor is also believed to affect aging, slowing it. He possesses talons along with his fangs, night vision, enhanced eyesight, and organic webbing. Oh, and he may actually be telepathic to a degree. As I said before, he's also a genius, specializing in genetics, but also having some pretty fierce computer skills. Number 3. First appearance. For those who are curious with where to start when it comes to Miguel O'Hara and his story, we first got a glimpse of him in a preview in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 365, which was also a supersized 30th anniversary issue for Spider-Man. This was where he first appeared, but he wouldn't be properly introduced until a few months later in his own series, Spider-Man 2099 issue number 1, which I believe is what the preview in the 30th anniversary was basically for. Spider-Man 2099 was actually the first comic to start off the 2099 line and universe, so Miguel was actually the first hero we'd come to know from 2099 as well. The first issue establishes Miguel as a brilliant but kind of cruel person whose desperation leads him to become a superpowered vigilante. I gotta say, I really love the art and the colors in this book. 2099 is such like a cool world, like really, it just visually is so striking. Number 2. Lila. For those who didn't notice, Miguel actually has his own AI assistant. Her name is Lila, which actually stands for Lyrate Lifeform Approximation. LYL. In the comics, Lila has a very different look than the animated universe. She kinda reminds me a bit of Marilyn Monroe in the comics, honestly. She also often expresses concern for Miguel, often giving him advice as though she was his friend, as opposed to her being his assistant. Although she does still call him boss like her animated Spider-Verse counterpart in the films. As an AI, there is a lot that Lila can do, but she also seems to be prone to catching human emotions sometimes as well, which is interesting for an AI. However, this was also likely a one-time thing, as it was later revealed that she had become susceptible to a virus after plugging herself into sort of like a worldwide news network and shutting down after being overwhelmed with basically too much emotion. Which honestly, I get it, Lila. I try to not listen too much to the news because I also get overwhelmed with too much human emotion. Number 1. Future problems. Miguel hasn't always existed just in the 2099 universe of Earth 928, which is believed to be a potential future for Earth 616. At one point, he actually found a home in the main continuity, a version of his past. During his time on Earth 616, his apartment number was funnily enough 2099. Cool on paper, but maybe not so great if anyone is, close to figuring out your secret identity as Spider-Man 2099. Just because he's from the future as well doesn't mean that he doesn't worry about it while living in what we would refer refer to as the Marvel present day. While time displaced, he also worried about the same issues we all do, such as climate change, heating up the earth, and threatening our future on the planet, politics, and well, romantic relationships, which honestly sounds like our everyday life here in 2023. For a man from the future, it sounds like Miguel can be fairly good at living in the present. That's about it. Number 10. Who is the Beyond Corporation? The Beyond Corporation, to expand on them and introduce them to you a little bit more, is basically the mastermind behind this whole operation. They seem to be wanting to turn the role of Spider-Man into a corporate gig. They managed to get their hands on the Spider-Man name and trademark, and as a result have selected Ben Reilly to act as their own Spider-Man. Instead of approaching the Spider-Man, Peter Parker, or also the Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Why? Well, we might get into the layers of that a little bit later. But Beyond basically tells Ben that they chose him because he has a strong will, and that's what they're looking for, someone who can basically get things done. They give Ben a swanky apartment, a whole team of comms to help him in the field, and super advanced tech to assist him in his heroics. They also send him out on missions, both to help and save the public, and to help and save Beyond at times. Also, honestly, if you want to be introduced to Beyond before jumping into issue 75 of Amazing Spider-Man, where this story begins, you can check out the final story in issue 74 of ASM, the final issue of the previous run. And why not flip back a page before you jump into the final story? There's a really fantastic Spider-Man recap for you to enjoy. It's really great. I loved it. I want to frame it somewhere. It's so cute. Number 9. Dreams. Something that I think is important to note when it comes to this story is the weird recurring dreams that seem to be showing up consistently, and the possibility that Peter Parker and Ben Reilly are sharing these same dreams. The recurring one that we keep coming back to in terms of themes and just what actually happens in the dream involves Uncle Ben. This is a particularly important moment in the story as it starts the whole thing off in issue number 75 of the Amazing Spider-Man series. At first it seems as though Peter is talking about a dream he is having, but later we see that Ben seems to be plagued with the exact same dream, featuring a faceless Uncle Ben Parker. Usually lengthy stories like this start off with something that sets the stage for the themes and often hint at what will be built up, where the story is moving towards. The dream thematically seems to deal with acknowledging who you are, confronting that, embracing that, and ultimately deals with legacy, something that both Ben and Peter seem to be struggling with at the time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear more about Spider-Man Beyond, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I got a lot more facts to throw at you. There's a lot going on in this story. Number 8. Ben is back. Ben is back, baby, but what does this mean for his character? Where is he coming from? Where did we last see him? These are all great questions. Let me try to answer some of them for you by giving you the full picture. Last we saw Ben, he was fighting to redeem himself after becoming a villain and taking up the mantle of Jackal. As Jackal, Ben was working to do what he thought was right by bringing back a bunch of dead folks as clones and trying to perfect the cloning process. This would help not just him, but a ton of other folks returned as clones. Of course, he kinda ended up creating a solution which allowed him to exert control over said clones. As Peter saw it, Jackal Ben had things kinda twisted. What he saw was all the power with none of the responsibility. In the end, Peter defeated Ben, refusing to join him, and Ben realized the error of his ways and fought to atone for his mistakes. At one point, he had his sins completely cleansed, as they were explained as happening because of basically a corruption of his psyche. Now he's back, but he doesn't seem to be too much worse the wear, considering all that happened more recently in his past. In fact, his time as Jackal remains kind of untouched for much of this story, although Ben does seem to be struggling emotionally. Number 7. The hottest couple returns. Aunt May and Doc Ock, of course. Oh, did you think I was going to say Spider-Man and Black Cat? No. That isn't a thing currently. But Aunt May and Doc Ock do get a pretty steamy and fun team up in issue 80 Point Bay. What, you don't believe me that they're the hottest couple in comics? Pfft, please, it says it right on the cover. Covers never lie to us, right? Right? This team up involves Aunt May and Doc Ock getting together to help save Peter's life, with May calling in a favor. Also, I love ruthless and determined Aunt May in this whole plot point. Aunt May is kind of a badass here. This tie-in, by the way, is important to the plot. All of them kind of are for Beyond. So if you're wanting to join us on this roller coaster of a ride, make sure you read the tie-ins and all the Point Bays. I like to call them Point Bays, but B is also an acceptable pronunciation in my books, considering it's short for Beyond, so B. I just like saying Point Bay. Number 6. Beyond's true motives. So, why does Beyond really want Ben Reilly as their Spider-Man? And do they really just want to make the world a better place, or do they have ulterior motives? How do they make money? And what's really going on in the scientific and experimental sandwich department? Those poor sandwiches! Someone free them, please. As time goes on, Beyond becomes more and more suspicious, and not just to you or I, the readers. I mean, I think we're all suspicious from the beginning, right? But also for Ben and Dr. Octopus. After Doc Ock's team up with Aunt May, he's hot on the trail of Beyond, who he believes has stolen his work. Ben is sent after Otto to apprehend him after he gets his hand on a very valuable asset of Beyond's, a drive with sensitive and pertinent information, which Beyond refuses to fill Ben in about when it comes to what the contents of this drive are. Ben manages to defeat Doc Ock, but Otto gives him a choice. He has made it so that Ben can actually access the drive's files without Beyond knowing. Ben can either look at the drive or simply return it without taking a peek at all. Of course, Ben is already suspicious at this point, so he chooses to look. He does not like what he finds. It turns out Ben wasn't chosen for his strong will, just the opposite actually. He was chosen because Beyond considers him malleable, due to him being psychologically compromised. Number 5. Janine is back. Not only is Ben returned, but he's also got his very own version of MJ, who is joining him along for the ride. We also get to see the return of Janine Godby in the final story of issue 74 of ASM, the lead into the Beyond event. Now for those who don't remember Janine, she was actually Ben's love interest back in the 1990s, and we haven't really seen her since then. She was on the run after she was severely mistreated by her father and basically killed him in self-defense. Her real name is Elizabeth Tyne, but she chose to change it to Janine Godby, because, you know, she on the run. And she still actually goes by Janine now, preferring it to her given name, probably because she associates that with a lot of trauma. Janine eventually felt that she needed to confront her past and accept the responsibility of her actions after listening to a speech that Ben gave to Kane about doing, well, just that. As a result, Janine turned herself in and confessed to killing her father. She ended up in prison and has been there till, well, now, when Beyond was able to make a deal to have her put in their care instead. During Beyond, she has mostly been confined to her and Ben's apartment, as she is still a criminal serving time. Nicer surroundings for sure, but she still acknowledges that she's pretty much just imprisoned. However, after developing her own suspicions and secretly being given the important Beyond drive from Ben, who then goes missing, the time comes for Janine to break out. Number 4. Miles gets served. And I don't mean he gets served some like delicious hamburgers or anything tasty like that. I mean he gets served in the legal sense. Miles Morales has also some Beyond tie-ins you'll be happy to hear, and to find out what's going on with him in the Beyond storyline, you can check out his own series from issues 33 to 36. Miles also makes an appearance in issue 81 of ASM, where he and Ben duke it out before teaming up to take on monster/villain Rhizome. However, while Ben ultimately decides not to tell Miles he should consider changing his name after Beyond told him to, because Beyond only wants Ben to use the Spider-Man mantle, and well, I mean, they do own it. Miles does later on get served by Beyond, unfortunately, as we find out in his own series. And that is a whole thing that he has to deal with in his own series, on top of dealing with other hero-related problems. There's a lot going on for Miles right now. He just had his own clone saga, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. Number 3. Queen Goblin. Queen Goblin is a new character who was introduced in ASM issue 88, but who is behind the mask? If it wasn't spoiled for you in the solicits, this is a revelation that may just rock the entire Beyond event. Still, I'm not gonna spoil this one for you. I also talked about Queen Goblin on my top 10 goblins list if you want to learn more about the design and the idea for her character, but without any spoilers still. But I will say that her identity could be something that will shake the Beyond Corporation to its very core. So definitely a character appearance that you won't want to miss, and you'll probably be very interested in what she's up to. Number 2. Black Cat and Mary Jane team up. Black Cat and Mary Jane need to team up to go on a heist? Black Cat and Mary Jane is a team up we've been waiting for a long time, and while these two often do not get along, I personally am here for the day when Felicia and MJ can just like be friends instead of just fighting over Peter all the time. Maybe this team up is a step in that direction, maybe not, but it sure is a fun one. If you need more reasons to read Beyond, this is one of them. Bam! Read this issue and enjoy the team up of these two. Remember, this is an event where all the tie-ins are relevant. Peter's life may even hang in the balance, but you'll have to read it to find out. Number 1. The unraveling of Ben Reilly. Remember how I said that Ben's time as Jackal seems to be mainly untouched? Well, later on in this story we find out kinda why that is. In issue 86 of ASM, we learn that Ben actually allowed Beyond to wipe his memory of his time as Jackal, which is why he didn't really know that his therapist, Dr. Kafka, was actually a clone, one he himself created. Yeah, Kafka had actually been working to try and rebuild Ben's framework when it comes to his mind, because the whole mind wipe thing is kind of ill-advised in her professional opinion. It's dangerous as it could cause Ben's personality to collapse because he's a clone. And well, I think you know where we're going with this revelation. After Ben learns more about Beyond's motives and begins to question who and what he's really working for and why, they decide it best if they remove recent memories to protect themselves from Ben's suspicions. And to protect Ben, I guess, so that he can keep working for them. And yeah, it doesn't go well. Memories beyond what they are scrubbing seem to unravel and disappear. What will Ben be like when he comes to? I really think you should jump into the story with us so you can find out that way. Number 10. Offspring of Carnage. I mean, this one is right in the title, but it's still really important to note that Toxin is the child of Carnage. But what does this mean? Why is it significant? Well, when it comes to Carnage being the offspring of Venom, it was a symbiote that was inherently more powerful than its sire. So you can imagine that if that is the way it went before, that is the way it's gonna go this time. Toxin is even more powerful than both Carnage and Venom as the grandbaby of Venom. Hence why this symbiote caused such a stir in the symbiotic world when it first appeared, especially when it came to the concerns of both Toxin's parent and their grandparent. Number 9. Patrick Mulligan. Patrick Mulligan was Toxin's first host and was a police officer. With Patrick, Toxin was on a journey to learn what it meant to be a hero and attempted to walk in Mulligan's footsteps, doing their best to walk the walk and talk the talk of being a true hero, despite having a secret darkness lurking within them that Toxin often had to fight against. Patrick unfortunately would be killed by Blackheart, the son of Mephisto, which was pretty bad news for Toxin. Toxin was then used by Blackheart to create his own symbiote warriors, and Blackheart took a chunk of the symbiote for himself as a sacrifice to be used in a ritual. Ouch. And friends, if you are loving this channel and this list, be sure to show your support for us over on Facebook, where you can also like and follow us. Yay! Number 8. Wanted Dead, Not Alive. The crazy thing about Toxin is just everything this poor symbiote has been through. It's more complex than other symbiotes due to it being the offspring of major sadistic villain Carnage, but still closely related to the now anti-hero, possibly full-on hero at this point, Venom. Which of course means that even to begin with, life was very much not smooth sailing for the symbiote. In the beginning, Toxin was actually actively hunted down by both Carnage and Venom, each symbiote wanting to destroy it for their own reasons. Carnage was basically worried about Toxin usurping it in regards to its evil ways and in regards to it being more powerful. Venom was worried about the symbiote's alignment with it being the child of Carnage and wanted to destroy it to avoid it becoming an even more deadly enemy. So almost as soon as it came into existence, Toxin was fighting simply to survive. Number 7. Eddie Brock. Even though Eddie is more well known for being the host of Venom, Toxin's grandparent, Eddie was also at one point bonded with the Toxin symbiote as well. Is that weird? Probably. Especially considering the two were forced to team up, and this was also a time when Eddie was terrified of symbiotes, and then they actually fought against the Venom symbiote together. Initially, they each had their vendetta against the new Venom, Agent Venom, aka Flash Thompson, but ultimately they were both dissuaded from following through with their plan to attack and kill Venom. Instead, the two teamed up and decided to accept their newfound bond. Eddie with Toxin decided to return to his more lethal protector approach, becoming an anti-hero once more alongside Toxin. Number 6. Suppressed. Not only did Toxin come into the world with both Carnage and Venom teaming up to try and kill it, but then the symbiote also later experienced a pretty traumatic time when it was suppressed using drugs, which basically just made it like a passenger going along for the ride with host Eddie Brock. This happened as a result of Eddie getting taken in by the FBI, who decided to expose the symbiote to inhibitor drugs, which suppressed its own voice and consciousness in Eddie's mind. Toxin truly has had a pretty toxic upbringing, if you ask me. Could you imagine existing in a body without any control or influence over what it did? Sounds horrifying. Although I guess maybe this is kind of like some weird revenge, because technically I think Toxin did that to Eddie in the beginning. I guess we can only hope that Eddie and Toxin's will and desires were similar at this point in time. Number 5. Agender. Although we used the term son in the title of this list, and I've said it before, and although Toxin is sometimes referred to as the son of Carnage, which is also why we use that term, Toxin is really neither son nor daughter. All symbiotes are considered agender, meaning they don't really have genders. Some choose to present more masculine or more feminine, and others choose to present more neutral, but Toxin and other symbiotes from Clintar don't really come with genders, and they reproduce asexually, all on their own. Although they do sometimes get some outside help when it comes to birthing new symbiotes, which the Venom symbiote received at one point from Eddie Brock, who remained bonded to it during a birth to kinda like support it. Sometimes symbiotes have been prone to use words like daddy, and some even seem more drawn towards certain genders when it comes to the host that they choose, but technically they don't have genders themselves, and are more gender fluid, usually when it comes to their presentation. Symbiotes being both agender and able to asexually reproduce also means though that at any point past their maturity, Toxin could basically produce an offspring all of their own that would likely be even more powerful even than Toxin, which I don't know what that symbiote is like, but I don't know if I want to meet that symbiote. Sounds insane. Number 4. Jubilile Van Scotter. Jubilile is the third host of Toxin. Toxin was passed on to her in the fight against Chthon, and before that she had her own symbiote and had also gained the Ray's symbiote as well. They were all together when they bonded to her. Jubilile's father passed away when she was a child, and a few years later she decided to set out and explore the world in his memory, as her father had been an experienced sailor who had taught her how to sail himself. She ran into Carnage, and a ritual he performed on her left her transformed, although not in the way he'd hoped. Instead of becoming his minion, she became empowered after being infected by a Darkhold augmented version of something similar to the Carnage symbiote, and which also tied her to Carnage and the villain's memories. Her connection to the Darkhold and the power of the symbiotes allowed Scotter to defeat Chthon, but seemingly at the risk of the lives of the symbiotes that she wielded. Seemingly anyways. Number 3. Many seeming deaths of Toxin. So many deaths. Toxin has seemingly died on more than one occasion, with the symbiote being set on fire twice and being suspected dead during at least one of those instances, back when Toxin was bonded with Eddie Brock and the two fought against Venom, who was bonded with Flash Thompson at the time. However, it turned out that Toxin survived on both occasions due to being so powerful and so durable. Later on, Toxin would be believed dead for a few years after facing Chthon, along with another unnamed symbiote and the Ray symbiote. However, it turned out it survived this battle as Toxin reappeared during the King in Black event. Number 2. Current host. Currently, Toxin is bonded with Bren Waters. Bren and Toxin met at some point after Toxin's supposed death following the defeat of Chthon. The two decided to team up together, with Bren, a teenager, requesting that Toxin give them a more adult appearance, which makes sense if you're fighting crime. Toxin obliged, and so when fighting together, they look more like Patrick Mulligan or Eddie Brock in regards to their overall intimidating, muscle-bound stature. We met Bren during the King in Black event, where we witnessed him and Toxin going out only to be accused of being part of the symbiote invasion by one of Alchemax's guardsmen, who they got into a fight with. The guardsman, it turned out, was actually Bren's father, Oscar, who apparently does not approve of symbiotes. Number 1. Most powerful symbiote, or at least almost the most powerful symbiote. Aside from Null maybe, or just the King in Black in general, I think Null is in a league all of their own, and then it's basically between, for me, Toxin and Anti-Venom. But this is Toxin's list, so I think we can give them the most powerful title, at least here, where they're alone on their list. Toxin is considered to be so powerful because of its heritage. Toxin is the child of Carnage, which is already an insanely powerful symbiote in terms of what it can do, and in terms of its resistance to standard weaknesses, such as sonics and fire. Toxin is super strong, agile, fast, durable, possesses superior stamina, has its own more efficient and specific version of spider sense, can shapeshift, camouflage, heal itself, crawl on walls, create webs, is a skilled tracker, and has a toxic bite, after bonding with Eddie anyways. I don't think they had the toxic bite originally.